everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for joining me here today. Today's video is going to be my April reading wrap-up, where I'm going to talk about all the books I read in April and what I thought about them. April was a bit of a slow reading month for me. I only read 6 books, which for me is not a lot, and I was just very busy, so I didn't get to read as much as I typically do. But despite that, I had one amazing 5-star read that is one of my favorites of the year so far. So if you're interested in hearing about the books I read this month, what I thought about them, and if they might interest you, feel free to keep watching. Let's get into it. So the first book that I read this month, which is also the one that is a major 5-star for me, is called Fat Chance Charlie Vega. It is by Crystal Maldonado. And I can't say enough good things about this book. I read it through my library in an ebook format, but I really want to purchase the hardcover for my collection. I absolutely loved this book. We follow the main character, Charlie, who is a Puerto Rican American fat teenage girl, and she is having a hard time getting along with her mother because her mother just can't accept her daughter's body and the way that she looks and is constantly trying to get her to change. And her only real reprieve is her writing. She enjoys writing, she wants to be a writer, and also her best friend, Amelia. In this book, she experiences her first real relationship, and it is a coming-of-age story. It is a beautiful story, and my favorite part of this book is really the societal commentary on being fat in our country and what that means in terms of how people treat you and kind of the experiences that you have. I've never really felt seen by a book before reading this one in the same way. It really captures the experience of being fat, not even just necessarily as a teenager, but just as a woman in general. Some of the things that it talks about, like for example, the mall scene where she talks about like, oh, I'm gonna have to go circle the accessories again because there's nothing else in here that's gonna fit me. That just rings so true, and all of the examples and the experiences that Charlie has in this book are very realistic and I think a really accurate portrayal. So I loved that about this. I thought the writing was great. I thought the characters were good. And yeah, all in all, favorite book I've read in a long time. So 5 stars, one of my favorites of the year. And if you're into YA contemporary, YA, coming of age stories, I think you'd really enjoy it. The next book I read this month is called The Minuscule Mansion of Myra Malone, and it is by Audrey Burgess. If this cover looks familiar to you, it is because I did a whole reading vlog about this earlier this, not this month, now it's May, early in April. So this was one of the books I read in a vlog, and so because of that, I'm not going to go too much into detail. I will instead link that video in the description. If you're interested in hearing more about this book, I'd highly recommend that you check that video out. But essentially, the main premise is that our main character, Myra, is kind of a recluse. She lives with her mom, but basically spends all of her time working on this minuscule mansion, this dollhouse. And her best friend basically forces her into writing a blog about the minuscule mansion. In doing that, that kind of brings about the storyline of this book. So it was very good. It was very interesting. I loved Myra as a character. I loved Willa / Trixie. You kind of have to read it to get what I'm saying, but the kind of grandmotherly, like older woman figure, she was just so warm and so loving and kind, and I really appreciated that character. The only thing I didn't love, and the reason I only gave this 4 stars as opposed to 4.5 or 5, is that I felt like some of the concept of like the magical component of this was a bit complex and hard to grasp. I talk a little bit more about that in that reading vlog, but that was really the only thing that I had a little bit of a difficult time with. But in general, the story and Myra's character and her kind of learning to come out of her shell a little bit was really interesting and inspiring, and I really enjoyed it. The third book I read this month is called How to Sell a Haunted House, and it is by Grady Hendrix. I read this through my library, so I don't have the physical book. I read it as an ebook. This was a huge anticipated release for a lot of people who enjoy the horror genre. I gave this 3.5 stars. So it's not my favorite book I've ever read in terms of the horror genre, but I also didn't dislike it. So basically the plot line follows two siblings, a woman named Louise and her brother Mark, who are estranged and basically can't stand each other, but they have to come together in order to sell their deceased parents' house. And as the title suggests, the house is haunted. So they have to go through and figure out how to sell this house that's haunted, and in doing so, like, how to have a relationship together. I thought one thing this book did really well was showcase the animosity between the two siblings. That's not at all what my sibling relationship is like. So it was really interesting to see that perspective of, you know, two siblings that like absolutely can't stand each other. I also thought in general, the concept of the story and like the haunting of the specific doll in the house was really interesting. What I didn't love, and the reason I only gave this 3.5 stars instead of 4, is that for me, the book felt very long, kind of for no reason. Like, it just felt like some of the information and some of the chapters were like very much filler, and we just weren't getting a lot from them. Like, for example, Mark's whole college storyline, I just didn't really see a point to it. Didn't love it. So the concept of the story and like everything that goes on between the siblings and in the family, it was all very good. It was just, I felt like a lot of the book could be cut out and you would still get the same storyline and have the same effect. It is a horror book, but I tend to like creepy, scary stuff rather than gory things. And this only had like one real scene I can think of that was kind of big on gore. So if that bothers you, obviously this book is not for you. But if you just in general like creepy, scary things and a little bit of gore and kind of blood doesn't bother you, I think you would enjoy this book. The next book I read this month is called Local Woman Missing, and this is a thriller book by Mary Kubica. And this book was released in 2021, but has kind of become a really popular thriller recently, and I've been interested in reading it, and so I got it through my library as an ebook. Took me a while to get it, but I did finally get it, and I have to say I did enjoy it. I gave this 3.5 stars as well, so just like the Grady Hendrix book. This thriller follows the story of a young pregnant woman named Shelby who goes missing, and shortly thereafter another woman named Meredith Dickey and her daughter Delilah go missing. And basically from the looks of things, it looks like when Shelby is found murdered that her husband did it, and when Meredith is found, it looks sort of like a suicide. Delilah is not found. Obviously, things are not what they seem, so the concept of this book revolves around figuring out what's happened to these women. I found all the like intertwining plot lines very interesting and compelling, so I loved the story of this. The reason I gave it 3.5 as opposed to 4 or more stars is because the Delilah / Carly storyline I just didn't see a need for, and I kind of became attached to that character that we meet, and we basically find out that essentially she's there to throw off the story, which fine, but I really like came to, you know, feel for her because she was in this horrible situation that we learn about, and we don't really learn anything about her after learning that she is not the Delilah we think she is. So I didn't love that about this book, and I thought the ending just felt really rushed, which tends to be a theme in a lot of thrillers. I find is that while it tends to like wrap up nicely, I always want to know more. Like I would have liked if this book ended with a chapter that was a year in the future. What the life of Delilah and her brother and her dad looks like a year from now. Just one chapter. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but it just always feels quite rushed for me in a lot of thrillers, and that was the case for this one. So those were my only negatives, but the story itself was a lot of fun, and I would recommend it if you enjoy thrillers. The next book I read was called A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. If this cover looks familiar, it is because I also read this in a vlog on the channel this month, or in the month of April. I gave this 4 stars. Basic premise is We're following a witch who has accidentally summoned a demon, and the demon cannot leave until they make a deal for her soul. So this is a very spicy romance novel. The writing is very good. I enjoyed it a lot. I liked our characters. I like that all of our female characters are super strong and independent, and I enjoyed kind of the universe in which this was set, where people know about like witches and demons and whatnot. It's not necessarily like a hidden thing. I enjoyed that aspect of this book, and there is a sequel, or technically I'm not sure if it's a sequel or just a book set in the same universe of Glimmer Falls that is coming out this year. So I will read it. I did enjoy this book. I gave it 4 stars. The final book I read this month is called The Agathas, and this is a YA mystery by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson. And I always find it interesting when people like co-write books. I don't know if I could do that. Just different voices and different authors combining can sometimes be a problem for me. But this book was so good. I enjoyed it so much. I gave it 4 stars. Basically, the mystery we're following is that our main character named Alice disappeared for 5 days last summer. And when she came back, she put everyone through like quite a scare. And so she ostracized a lot of her friend group, and she kind of doesn't fit in anymore. She was part of a very popular group, and now she's kind of on her own. Not only that, but her ex-best friend Brooke is also dating her ex-boyfriend Steve. So she's in kind of a, crappy situation that she doesn't love. And then, to make matters worse, Brooke, the ex-best friend, turns up murdered. So Alice and her school tutor turned friend, Iris, end up investigating the death and trying to figure out who murdered her friend. So it's a really interesting story for a YA mystery. I thought the complexity of the story was really interesting, and that there were so many kind of different paths that they took and explored in, who done it essentially. I am really looking forward to the sequel, which, exciting for me at least, comes out in May. I think it comes out the end of this month, and I already pre-ordered it during the Barnes & Noble pre-order sale. So I got 25% off of the cover price, which is nice. I ordered it. I'm really excited because there is still kind of one large plot line in this book that isn't clearly solved by the end of this book, and I assume that's what we're gonna get in the sequel. Really looking forward to it, really enjoyed it. The one thing I didn't love about it was just so the chapters were broken up often by like text threads or like newspaper stories, things like that. And I love that sort of thing. I'm cool with like mixed media writing. I find that interesting. What I didn't love was that I felt like the text messages were like trying too hard to be young and hip and like use slang and stuff. Like, it just didn't read to me as authentic for a teen. I mean, I'm not a teenager, but I'm still quite young, and I just didn't feel like the banter like back and forth in the text messages felt real to me. Like, it just felt like they were using way too many like acronyms and stuff that I just don't know if people are actually using. Maybe they are and I just think it's cringy. Which is possible, but I don't know. That was the only thing I didn't love about it, but I am really looking forward to the sequel. So that is it. Those are the 6 books I read this month. One major 5-star favorite read so far this year for me, or one of my favorites this year. So it was a good month, even though it was a slow reading month. I found one like major 5-star for me and a few like really good fun books as well. So that is pretty much it for this video. I'd love to hear what you read this month, if you read any of these books, what you thought of them, and what your plans are for reading in the month of May. Feel free to leave me a comment and I will get back to you. You will likely see me in a reading vlog next week, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye.